Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today we're reviewing the newest album from Saxon, Thunderbolt. Saxon are back at it again, folks, releasing, I believe this is now their 22nd studio album. I might be slightly off on that number, but pretty much they put out a lot of albums, and the fact that they have managed to still be a pretty consistent group, especially with their last few records that they've put out, that's somewhat surprising, I guess you could say. And this record here, I don't think is really much of an exception to what they've been doing so far. I think this is a pretty solid heavy metal album that they've put out here with Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is an album where I feel like the first half or so of this album is the stronger half. The album just starts off with this kind of opening track, Olympus Rising, which is kind of this track that just kind of sets the mood, just kind of builds up an atmosphere, I guess you could say, before launching into the real first complete song here. And I think it's a decent opener. I do feel like maybe it's a little unnecessary, but it doesn't really take away from the album in any way, shape, or form. Before getting to the title track, which is a pretty solid metal track. And one thing about this album that I really like all the way through is just the guitars. There's lots of great guitar riffs throughout this thing, lots of great solos as well. I feel like the guitars are definitely the strongest point of this album, and Thunderbolt shows that off immediately with some of the guitar parts here on this track. Another one of the standout tracks here on this album is They Played Rock and Roll, which is just a nice tribute track to Motorhead, of course, which disbanded a couple of years ago after the death of Lemmy, unfortunately. And given that Saxon and Motorhead were kind of, from a similar, scene at a similar time, obviously Saxon are just paying tribute really to one of their contemporaries that was obviously also very influential. And this is definitely one of the better tribute tracks I've seen to Motorhead, just because I feel like it definitely captures the feel of, it feels a bit nostalgic, the track, but at the same time, it's its own thing, really, is what I'm trying to get at. It doesn't feel like it needs this tribute to really kind of stand out and be an interesting track. However, the fact that the tribute is, there in this song makes it more interesting. And I do like how they have the vocal sample of Lemmy saying, that they're Motorhead and they play rock and roll. I felt like that was a very nice use of a sample there. I felt like had they done a bit too much with that vocal sample, had they made it go on a bit too long by having more vocal samples or something like that, it could have gotten in the way of the track's flow. But the way it's implemented here in this track is done very nicely. And overall, it definitely is one of the highlight songs here on this album. Another one is Nosferatu, which is just a track that kind of has a sort of darker edge to it, of course. And I think it's a really fun track overall. And, it works very well in the context of the album. The track Predator that appears towards the middle of this thing is also another one of the standouts. I really like how on this track they bring a bit more aggression. And by aggression, I mean some death metal growls at points here on this track, which is a very nice change of pace here on this album. Of course, the vocals throughout this project are just pretty great all the way through. No real complaints with them at any point on this project, but just the addition of those more aggressive vocals here on this track really makes this track stand out and have a bit more of an identity of its own. And as a result, I think it's definitely a pretty solid cut here, one of my favorites on the whole album. And while, like I said, the first kind of half or so of this project I feel like is the more solid half, the second half, I don't think there's any tracks that are necessarily bad on it, but it does weaken a bit. The last four tracks kind of blur together, in my opinion. Not necessarily that any of them are particularly bad songs or anything like that. They're all pretty, solid tracks on their own, but I feel like they're the four least memorable out of the entire track listing, and the fact that they're all placed together towards the end of the album doesn't necessarily do them any favors. Maybe having them spread out at different points in the track listing could have made it a bit better, but it just makes it a bit redundant towards the end of this thing. It's not the worst problem that the album could have, but yeah, it is what it is, I guess. So overall, I'd have to say that Thunderbolt is a pretty solid addition to Saxon's discography. Like I said, there's a great amount of, pretty good cuts on this thing, particularly in the first half, especially the ones I mentioned by name earlier on are some of my favorites and are some of the tracks I feel like I'll be coming back to in the future. However, like I also mentioned earlier, some of the tracks towards the end of this thing that just don't really stand out quite as much as some of the others aren't, quite as interesting. I don't really feel like I'll be coming back to them quite as much. The same can kind of be said for the opening sort of track thing that, like I mentioned earlier, doesn't exactly help or hurt the album all too much. It's just kind of there, I feel. It's a good album overall, I would say. If you're a fan of Saxon, if you're a fan of more traditional heavy metal, I feel like you're gonna like this project, and you should definitely check it out. However, if you're not a fan of either of those things, this album really isn't up your alley, so I wouldn't recommend checking it out. But yeah, if you're a metal fan, you're looking for a new good metal album to check out, this one is maybe worth giving a listen to, particularly some of those tracks on the first half that I mentioned earlier, because like I said, some of those tracks are great. But overall, yeah, I think this is a solid addition to the discography of a band that's been going on for a good while now, and I think that the fact that they've managed to keep the quality up after this time is really impressive. So good job, Saxon, for keeping up the quality here and putting out a good album. So yeah. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this review, leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on other music-related content like album reviews, countdown lists, discussion videos, things of that sort. Comment down below what were your thoughts on this project. Follow me on all my social medias linked in the description down below. And make sure you guys stay golden.